Analyzing the concept that death is the only truth that exists on earth from a Voltairean perspective involves embracing the wit and skepticism characteristic of this Enlightenment philosopher. Voltaire, known for his satirical and critical thinking, often confronted established beliefs with irony and humor. When approaching the concept of death as the ultimate truth, Voltaire would likely engage in a skeptical, satirical, and irreverent discourse. Skepticism and Humor. Voltaire was a staunch advocate of reason and a critic of superstition. He would approach the idea of death as the sole truth with a healthy dose of skepticism, questioning the profundity of the statement and exposing its ironies. He might argue that while death is indeed an inescapable truth, it is also a truth we often avoid or sugarcoat. From this standpoint, he would point out the absurdity of humanity's efforts to deny or postpone the inevitable, often through religious dogmas, elixirs of immortality, or quests for everlasting youth. Candide's approach. Voltaire's most famous work, Candide, embodies his satirical style. Candide, the main character, undergoes a series of misadventures that lead him to question the philosophical optimism of his mentor Pangloss. Voltaire's point is that, in the face of suffering and death, blind optimism is absurd. Similarly, in the context of the truth of death, he might argue that absolute pessimism is also absurd. Voltaire's philosophy promotes a middle ground, where individuals confront the truth of death with reason and a healthy dose of humor. He might suggest that, instead of indulging in unrealistic optimism or overwhelming pessimism, we should accept the inevitability of death and strive to live life with intellectual honesty and a sense of humor. Religious critique. Voltaire was a critic of organized religion and might also approach the concept of death by questioning religious doctrines related to the afterlife. He would likely argue that religious beliefs, while providing comfort and hope, also perpetuate the idea that death is not the only truth. In his characteristic style, he might expose the contradictions and ambiguities in religious explanations of death and the afterlife. Conclusion. From a Voltairean perspective, the concept that death is the only truth that exists on earth invites skepticism, humor, and a critical examination of human responses to this truth. Voltaire would encourage us to confront death with intellectual honesty and a clear-eyed understanding of its inevitability while remaining open to the humor and absurdity of human efforts to grapple with this existential truth. In doing so, he would remind us that in embracing the truth of death, we can find a balance between optimism and pessimism, grounded in reason and humor.